Welcome everyone. Good evening. It is the Minneapolis Poetry Sanctuary open mic, and I'm just gonna let's see here. All right, there's my face. Welcome. It's a little different this week, this month on the open mic because we have a theme of stories. So there's going to be some flash fiction, some creative prose, and just some regular poems. I'm so excited to have the great poets and writers that we have tonight. And let's just get started. Wendy Brown-Baez, welcome. Unmute yourself and tell us about you.
Hi. Thanks for having me here on Poetry Sanctuary, and welcome to everybody. It's a beautiful evening in Minneapolis. So I've been enjoying the having a little bit of time outside today, but I'm glad to be here right now. I'm the creator of Writing Circles for Healing. So I lead writing workshops for healing and memoir in community spaces. I mostly have been working with Pathways, Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop, Writing to Wholeness, doing some things on Zoom right now during the pandemic. But in the past, I've been in libraries and yoga studios and bookstores and everywhere, there, here, there, and everywhere. And I have a book called Heart on the Page, which is a writer's guidebook if you're interested in deepening your own writing practice, or if you're interested in also facilitating writing workshops. I have a lot of tips and advice. And I tell lots of stories. I have many, many, many stories. And so the theme tonight is what really caught my attention. And the first thing that I want to read is a poem that is inspired by those books where you choose your own adventure. So like if you choose page 25, you go in one direction, and if you choose or you choose that, to go down that path or open that door, it sends you to page 25 or it sends you to page 50. So that was kind of the idea of this poem. And also that it's kind of a spiral. There's lots of memories spiraling together. So it's called Beach Scenes. I can never forget that day at the ocean, the way the fierce waves crashed against the rocks. It was a hot day and the sand was warm. It was so hot, I wanted to wade in the water, but the water was too cold to stay longer than a minute. I expected to lie in the sand with the sun on my face and fall asleep. It was too windy to build a fire, and the sand under the shadow of rock was cold. We came to the beach to rest after grocery shopping. We had bags and boxes too heavy to carry. We had to take turns moving them up the highway, then sticking our thumbs out. We came to the beach to play. The sea sparkled and the wind was calm. We came to the beach to find shelter from the argument we just had. We were too angry to go on. We came to the beach to unfold a picnic, bread and cheese and olives in a plastic bag. We came to the beach because we were traveling in circles up the highway and down again. The kids shrieked because the water was cold. The kids shrieked when they dove in. The water was rough and slammed them back. The water was as warm as a bathtub, and we floated. The kids ran up and down the beach, and we flattened ourselves out of the wind. The storm was sliding its way from the horizon, and we kept our thumbs out even though we wanted to stop on the beach. The beach was pristine and deserted. We flew by in the truck, and we wanted to stop. We bit back the words. The crates of vegetables rattled in the back. The sun was sinking into the sea, and it was time to pack up, but all I wanted was the moon. The darkness was dusting the sky, and we shivered. I brushed the sand off my feet to put on my shoes. I washed my sticky hands in the sea, and foam covered my feet. I wrote a poem and put it in a bottle and threw it into the sea. I sketched the angry words on crumpled paper from my pocket. I corked it up so it could drift away. I brushed the words to the deep. It's possible that someone found it who cannot read English. I hope they are unable to find a translator. I signed it with a heart despite the words of anger, because that is the language I speak best. It's possible that we lifted our faces to the moon and the storm left behind only driftwood. So hope you saw how the different adventures, the different angles from that piece. It's kind of an experiment. And my next piece is a piece of flash fiction, and it is about death. So I will let you know ahead of time, but it's kind of tongue in cheek. So I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at where I go in this piece. It's not about loss and mourning, although we've all experienced so much loss and mourning this past year, but that's not what this is about. It's called Little Secrets. Right before I died, I told all my secrets. It wasn't that I was a secretive person. To the contrary, I was known for raw honesty. I created instant intimacy with people I met. Once you got to know me, you would find out I had endless stories to share. Travels by hitchhiking, miracles and adventures, friendship among fellow pilgrims. When I started to confess my secrets, I realized there was no end to them. None of my friends had the whole truth. I don't know what compelled me. Maybe I thought it was a way to fill out the picture so my eulogy would be accurate. I assumed everyone would talk about how creative I was. I could expect nothing less. Maybe it was the imp in me. They walked around in a daze at the memorial, trying not to bump into each other. I had told my son, I don't want a weepy remembrance, but a party with champagne, and the music had better not be country. I wanted a Put de Mayo CD like Coffeeland, something dancey. Oh, I was feisty before I died. I'd had it by then, watching my body vaporize before my eyes. Every damn person I knew had advice. Try miso soup or visualizations. Anything besides, what do you really want, Lily? So I could say, just let me go. Preferably with a choir of nuns singing Gregorian chants and 100 candles. But no one has an imagination when it comes to dying, so I got a boombox and a bottle of Shiraz. By the time the hospice nurse, what was her name? So practical, so good at letting me tank up on drugs, got called in, everyone understood. Let me go. I started to tell my secrets. Every friend full of morning blues and exquisitely unprepared for what I was about to say, except my husband. By the way, has anyone found him yet? The dying wasn't hard. 1 minute you're here, the next minute well, the best way I can describe it is like this. You had the most amazing dream, and when you wake up, you know that dream is true. Anything is possible. That's how it feels to be on this side. I suppose on earth we called it heaven. I would send a message, but what I have found is that it's hard enough to get someone to listen face to face. Imagine when there's a veil. I wish I could take those secrets back, though, because they don't have much to do with who I am becoming. It was like passing around a candy dish until it's empty, smelling sweet, but no longer a temptation. I didn't think that everyone would get stuck in those stories. A little footnote on a life they thought they knew. But here's the best secret of all. It doesn't end. In fact, in a way, it's just the beginning. So I have another poem that's about writing stories. How to leave the story you are writing. First, you notice your typing fingers have paused, and the lines you know by heart are beginning to fade. Then you try to darken the font. You try a bolder color, maybe resize. Still, it's fading. Although not before you have tracked its ache across your life. Not before the fists clutching the rocks gathered from the last beach you strolled together have become imprinted with regret. Not before the miniature bottle of tequila you always hide on the altar on Dia de los Muertos has fallen and broken, leaving a tear of salt water where once you knew intoxication. Then you know it is not your aging eyes, not the screen pixelated with decisions, not the words you have forgotten to pronounce. Somehow, the story has grown wings. Somehow, it has soared away, its spine snapping with a turn toward truth. The story you are writing doesn't need you anymore. You wonder why it took you so long to admit it, why you waited to unwind its grip around your throat so you can take a deep breath and one deeper still and begin again. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I don't know why it's not here. Okay. Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm so happy to have you back again. There were so many great lines there. I love the one about there being no country music at your funeral. That's too funny. And I also love the line that something about it's hard enough to get someone attention face to face. Can you imagine with the veil? You know, that's pretty great. And the choose your own adventure. I loved those books. I love those. So that was a really neat, idea. And I did follow it. I think we all,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it was successful
It worked.
as far as, yeah, as far as I know. All
All
right.
right.
Well,
Thank you.
Charlie, welcome, welcome. And yeah, let's get you started here. I don't know how to unpin myself here. I'm having trouble. Replacement.
Are you there? Am I there?
Oh, there you are.
Okay. I did find the short story that's written as a prose poem, so I'll share that first. I'm Charlie Curry. I've been around since God was a child. I'm write poetry now at the behest of the gang of women in my life, all forced me to take a loft course about 20 years ago. And that got me serious about the craft. And I am forever grateful to them, and am still writing. So they're being fierce about this has paid off, I think, in terms of what they get out of it. So here are two. I have two pieces tonight. The first is a very short story written as a poem, as a prose poem, and the second is a long poem about a struggle with the landscape. So the first one is called Move Along, There's Nothing to See Here. The first sign was a half explosion in the central lab. By half, I mean it started, but it never finished. As if it could change its mind big bang, mid bang, or got swallowed partway through. And it left no trace, no smoke, no fire, no rubble, just an empty room. By empty, I mean really empty. No light, no walls, no floor, no ceiling. Strange, because adjoining rooms were still there, solid as ever. In place of the lab was an infinite hole. I mean, unfathomable. No limits or shape or size, no matter. We couldn't do much except close it up permanently, sealed tight, heavy door, serious lock, bars across the outside walls. Sometimes people who don't work here come by. What's in that room, they ask. And we say, nothing, nothing at all. And here's the poem. It's called Buckthorn. And there are some epigrams here and there. This part has one. For every complex problem, there is a solution that is simple, straightforward, and wrong by H.L. Mencken. There is little native here. Only one thing I see started out here, sprung from the ground because it belonged. Through immutable clay, unseen under grass, though immutable clay, unseen under grass, has not moved, is not transformed. And trees, some old enough to be indigenous, one elm at least, preceded the farm this once was. But from clay and elms, a whole landscape is not made. There is nothing native here. Not me, not the grass I rolled out, not the buckthorn thick around it. Dark green leaves, copper-skinned stems. One immigrant contemplates another. It is useful to review genealogies born of inattention. We all quit sometimes, impatient. Who wants to master mechanics of soil erosion, organic imbalances? Buckthorn began, wherever it began, hemmed in by weather or chewing creatures or other plants. Here it grows hysterically, greedy for all the light, all the soil. I understand none of it, yet am drawn in against time allotted for the arcane. The lawn's edge, a border beyond which no attention strayed. Too easy to focus on annual flats of petunias waiting for spring's last frost. Who noticed the genealogy of the woods beyond? Flat black land topping the clay, begat the steel plow, begat turned over prairie, begat wind push soil, begat buckthorn hedges, begat more buckthorn, and here it is, dense as now vanished prairie grass. Half-dead fountains, once graceful sprays of green, sheltering sprays, monochrome and dark. Pruning cannot restore it to itself. Each branch fights to a standstill, dies, tangled with another, only half alive. It won't fall down by itself, or die completely, or go away. Even the deer won't eat it. My own begats brought me to this place. Rich black earth called my grandparents, could not hold my parents who drifted to cities, or me who drifted here, or my children far away now, drifting on their own dreams, leaving with me voices now aged or dead, that celebrities that celebrate complexity, embrace hard questions, that hear the wildflowers now silent. And another epigram, this one from Genesis. Then God said, let the earth produce a fresh growth. Let there be on the earth plants bearing seed, fruit trees bearing fruit, each with seed according to its kind. So it was spoken on the third day. We moved in more recently. Raspberries greeted us, hickory nuts, gooseberries, wild roses and wildflowers. There were ferns and cedar trees, all among the poplar and the sumac and the elms. There was also buckthorn, or at least there was probably buckthorn, or at least we didn't plant any, or at least we didn't know. Since it was our own garden, lacking only a tree of wisdom, we said it was good, just the way it was. Another epigram. Attractive berries all summer long, rapidly develops into narrow columns, thornless. This is an entry for buckthorn in an old grower's catalog. The woods were already dense. In summer, we lived as in a deep woods cabin, even though there were neighbors enough from the very beginning. How good it was to be surrounded by thick leaves and green, green and green and yet another green. How good it was to not see what color the houses were, whether curtains were open, whether neighbors watched TV or us. How good to hear rain on leaves, the various green leaves, and windows open at night, on the roof rain in and on a different pitch, and thinking nature would nurture itself, we left it to grow as it would. Another epigram. Ecological threat, exotic buckthorn tends to form dense, even-aged thickets, crowding out and shading native shrubs and herbs, often completely obliterating them. That's from a horticultural website. What is it about time that changes things? Gathering data, perhaps, information from data, perhaps, hard experience, more likely. For decades, seductive dark green leaves, green early, still green when they drop, long after everything else. Worked their strangling roots around everything, fewer greens than none but one, with snakeskin bark, copper when wet, foundational plant, fundamentalist plant, the one true plant, no other plant before it, leans for support on stronger, straighter trees, then greedy for light, takes it all. Neither crabgrass nor sumac can break the root pack. Another epigraph. Buckthorn's astrology is under the influence of Saturn, from an herbologist's website. Taskmaster of the zodiac, controller of bones and hard work, look on me now, dragging stalks of buckthorn, saw and poison close at hand. As the stump count grows, so does the outline of the neighboring house, an outbuilding we didn't know was there. The contour of the hillside emerges, geometries and topographies revealed. Are the oaks along the street really in a straight row after all? Lost toys are unearthed. Recovery. Raspberries come back. Wildflowers come back. Sumac emerges, but does not dominate. Its red leaves so red in fall.
Thank you so much, Charlie. That was just wonderful. It always is. I love that you use nature to make connections and disconnections. I think that's just beautiful. And I really loved your line, what is it about time that changes things? That was beautiful. Thank you, thank you. All right, well, up next we have IA Virgin Poet. Unmute yourself and we look forward to hearing from you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Sorry about that. Yep.
Okay, here we go with my first poem. I a virgin poet, that's how I'm known in the community of poetry. I love writing. And when I read it, it's like a high. It's like, oh my God, you wrote that? Wow. And people say the same thing. So I love it. Dedicated to Linda in honor of Jose Ivan Sacasa. Presented gifts returned in anger. Wrapping fingers on throats, cutting palms of rough handles, drifting on stumbling feet, folding knees and feeling faint and cold and staggering, reaching out, not being able to bear images of stained memories in my mind, so often unwashable, wedged between smelling like haunting past and whimsical Cinderella stories, sparkled with balloons and streamers. The end of the world is funnier than you think. Something is wrong with common life and unkind times that we pretend to laugh and act as if it's okay. The human sorrow never turns away. It's an experience of suggestion and honesty you hope for. No one wants to cross that bridge of quiet strangers. Strangers are disposable. Make the hurt go away. No voice, no stance. My windows have been naked for 12 months. They don't wear dresses anymore. Ink has spread on linen sheets and reflect wrinkles where stories are being told. When you spend too much time there, waiting to die, to never get out. No words are said or understood, just looks, no talks. You got to understand that breaking distance of barriers of guilt and neglect are memories that creak in chalk of hearts and love gone. Rain like tears will seep that pain and mesh within blackened skies, preventing hurt shifting inside. The chest is tight, the back shoulders and head heave as the cry of this celebration shouldn't be there. But the hurt and shame of all those years were being featured. Leave, the voice said, a deep sigh. The upstairs celebration seemed too far away, longing for the familiar, trying to recapture a pulse, any pace, but beats were long and feeble beneath the dirt. No windows to see the light as once did, wishing, waiting, regretting, now pushing thoughts aside, knowing no tomorrows to get up to. Rest would come with emotions left unfinished, a restless sleep, a smothering exit. Good night, rest in peace. So the next one is By Chance for Linda and in honor of Jose Ivan Sacasa. Still hurting, not ready to trust. Her sun is covered with clouds as winds sweep her pain into colors not spoken, but remembered. Her order of life has grown cold, as bare as trees and sun-baked lands that mar her soundness to find comfort in her words. Drowning in the bittersweet memories as she grapples for a promised love that he wrecked with finesse. He's a storm that electrifies her atmosphere, bringing pain to her veins that fold in upon her and crash in her mind. Fragile features showcase oppressed depths of tears, uncontrollable but running deep inside her soul as she clamps her hands over her mouth, seeking no pity. She is reassured that no one dies because they lose something. You know, hold on. You know, life is easier, there's nothing to lose. And to lose herself in a man who thought he owned her, whom she allowed to keep her a victim, splintered and devoid her of any emotions. She has been scarred, and this tasteless words had broken her. And to erase this disappointed betrayal only grew silence on neutral ground until by coincidence she met a man who would break her and turn her off like a wind rustling the leaves of a tree, a timeless space filled with fractions of seconds and constant reminders of suffering for a man, created walls as she walked around as mirrors still criticize her reflection, feeling outside of her own, not enjoying her loneliness and how she could uncondition the undercurrents of her drifting toward him. No longer wondering, despite her overwhelming misery, to never make mistakes and start life again. She wanted to be with him and be looked at as someone and be remembered. A man is born with an awareness of dissembling, disturbed at the fact she wanted to belong to him completely. His height, his shoulders, his manners etched beautifully, but scared her. She would never let a man hurt her again. Awfully alone, but needing to be held by him, a different outlook on love awakened, drowning her out of a veneer of fear of closeness, but still encasing her. There is no escape when you want a man. There is no escape when a man wants you and you want him. And she cares for him. And in going after him, she was doing what she didn't want to. As she stares at the blackened skies, afraid to try again, to take haven in his arms, they kiss, and her sanity escapes her. Tonight, she trembles at the thought that he is the man to touch her forever. I.A. Virgin Poet. Dedicated to Linda.
We
Still
can't
on
see
your
your
love.
face, sweetie. We can't see your face. Thank you.
Dedicated to Linda. Still mourn your loss. Hindrance. Multitude of colors, of vague ideas of what I want in life. Cleansing my mind of darkness, sublime images channel me to explore the twist of untold layers that are woven into textured fabrics of uphill climbs, full of emotional ailments, leave me isolated in a lonely world with afflictions where nothing is understood or said. And feeling helpless, I created a destructive force that transitioned me into bubble-like dreams, lacking unseen merits and values of experiences. I immerse myself to a poetic voice where I can change others and also myself. I started to cry, panicking with emotions that here in Harlem, there are dark fields at war, devaluing human life. Gunshots are reminders of curtains closed, hearing sufferings of lost daughters and sons in an elevated state. I'm in a war zone, a winter discontentment inside of me, and the past held me captive in this chaotic world with no dress rehearsals of patterns of ink instilling emotions of vivid mental imagery. I now can open my windows to a myriad of new ideas, not being blindsided by the realities of the real world. These gateways will allow me to engage expression of creativity, and life will unfold my pain into entertainment. A new opportunity to revitalize and renew, healing my wounds of past endeavors will remove my negative energy from my body, mind, and soul. I'll write new and fluid poems from my journey within. Releasing this pain will quiet my mind. I.A. Virgin Poet. Did you like it?
Yes, just wonderful. Are you reading another one or are you good for now?
You want me to get, hold on. Oh, wow. Okay, so, oh yeah. Let me see, did I finish it? Yes. COVID-19 virus 2020. Dedicated to Linda and in honor of Jose Ivan Sacasa. More or less, every trace of normalcy has begun. The purge of COVID-19 has left behind deadly consequences where we paid a heavy price. of an attack where the squeal of the dead went unheard and spoke of an aloneness of twisted dreams gone, making us helpless and robbing our very souls. As it spread quickly and globally with little cause for joy, we were scared and alone. And in its indifference and incomprehensiveness stood the history of time as it revealed its truth by the barest economy and plain description that stripped us of our core and entangled the world. It claimed unknowledgeable leaders, quietly persistent in its plan, making its mark of tremendous power where there is no more comfort as we just wait attentively and hearing some of us will die before our time. Of a time of long gone kisses when things were defined as opportunities, a way of a normal life. You came and we looked for a chance for humanity. I'm going crazy as I remember the past. Living forever became an assault, and survivors we are. Rest in peace to all who passed before their time. I, a virgin poet.
Thank you so much, I.A. Virgin Poet. I am just so excited when new people come and share their hearts with us. You had so many good lines. Oh my gosh. No voice, no stance, storm to an atmosphere, awareness of dissembling. Thank you so much. And you're coming to us from New York, so we love that. Up next, we have Kathy Ferrell. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay. First of all, yesterday was Autistic Pride Day. So happy Autistic Pride Day from your favorite local autistic. I'm coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I am going to be sharing with you tonight the first half of my story, Borderlands. And it begins like this. Since the white man had cleared the valleys, staking claim to the fertile bottomland and using the fresh timber for their homes and fences, she had kept to the tree line. Once she had roamed where she would, through these valleys, over mountains, crossing rivers. But she was so much older now. It was different. The gouged out wounds of cleared land spread further year by year, always with the wide, muddy river in the center. With each passing moon, she found herself more and more at the base of the mountain, where there was still a fragile peace to be found in the trees. True, she could have climbed higher and competed with the mountain lion for meat, living off the flesh of deer and crow carrion, but she was stubborn and above all, curious. The red men had not spent a night in this valley in 2 generations, and these white men were a novelty to her. So she settled herself alongside them and watched in wonder. In the early times, a pattern emerged among this new kind of men. The more prosperous they were, the closer they built to the bank of the wide river. Those were the ones that moved things on boats and made separate buildings for no other purpose than inviting in others so that they might sell them the things they brought in on the boats. It was not long before the boats increased in number and size. Some were stacked high with people and bore great black trunks that belched smoke and sparks into the dark velvet sky. On their sides, this kind bore a great red paddled wheel that turned constantly, water being caught up and splashed out and back again into the great river. These boats would dock, and then the people who lived there ran to and fro for days like ants, so busy were they. men in fine clothes and women bright like birds' feathers beside them, strong giant men who worked side by side with mules and oxen to unload the boats, women selling small wares from baskets they carried on their hips, sometimes slipping into the shadows with the fine-clothed men for a stolen moment. All of this she watched with great interest from her hidden places. She thought of them as the bank people. It was the other people that built their cabins on the farthest edges, latecomers who had no choice but to build where they could find room, raising their children in self-pity and cursing their luck, and the natural border dwellers who, though they had the same limbs and were known sometimes to find mates among the bank people, were nonetheless formed differently inside. Wherever this kind found themselves, they always sought out the borders. This last kind built at the base of the mountain, and some even climbed up onto her skirts to find a home. And something like a bird flying over in the dark would see ribbons of smoke from their fires, spaced at respectful distances, curling up toward the moon. Those who dwelled like this rarely took it into their head to go among the crowds and docks of the bank people. They seemed to go there only when they must, and both they and their mules would balk distrustfully at each unfamiliar sight. They never stayed long, unless it was a man alone, who sometimes would fall drunk asleep in a doorway, only to wake with the morn and find his horse stolen. She watched all of this mostly in silence and shadow. She disturbed little. She refrained from hunting among the bank people. She enjoyed watching the little ones tumbling barefoot around the neat front yards of cabins that were pressed on all sides by the whispering trees. If the babies of these border dwellers avoided snake bite and fever and bright poison plump berries and any of the countless other mishaps that were known to befall what the bank dwellers had come to call mountain people, then they only grew and produced more babies. Every few generations, one would go mad and pile things into a wagon and make his children climb on top of those things, curling their fingers around the securing ropes for balance. He would sit his maid in front, hand her the smallest child, and then he would climb on beside her and take hold the reins of his animals. Keeping to the low leafy branches, she would sometimes keep pace and follow along for a while, unless there was a dog trotting along beneath the wagon. But she liked watching pied oxen and roan horses and sweating mules with coppery flanks. Snapping the leather to their rumps, the mad one would leave, cursing the stony ground and turning his eyes from a particular tree and the lone burial place beneath it as he passed. The moon grew lean and then fat, only to starve once more. The snows came, and then the green things, and with each new greening came a change in the bank dwellers. The mountain people changed too, though always lagging behind. She watched them make a road, not for themselves this time, but for what they called a train. Afterwards, they tried to put back the tall trees they'd cut, but they planted only sad, bare things and strung them all together with miles of wire, and she laughed from her perch as she watched. The moon marked more time on her celestial spiral. The dwellers of this valley were now so many that they needed a place for their dead. The surrounding slopes that they had so carefully culled of stones to make soft for their corn and beans now held only bones. She watched them bring the stones all back again, one by one, sweating to prop them up, and she laughed at the madness that seemed to run all through their blood. Sometimes when there were none about, she drifted among these stones and tried to read the names. Once she had known symbols of long ago men, but these she did not know. When she touched them, she felt nothing special. There was no magic to the stones, only puzzle. One morning, she watched the last of the mountain cabins fall, abandoned, and not long after that, men from the bank dwellers became as busy as she'd ever seen them. They graded crooked wagon ruts into better roads leading out to those secluded places. They hauled lumber and tools and barrels and made so much noise that for a time she fled higher up the mountain and did indeed survive on deer. When at last her will collapsed to her curiosity, she returned to find that the men had filled up the holes from which the people had drawn water. Now they dug new ones, and on top of these holes they put houses. And in those houses, the sons of the first madmen raised their children. It was at this time in her age that she gave in to her desire to truly know them better, to understand. She found a widow with no children of her own, and like herself, the last of her line. The widow's house sat on the exact spot where once had stood an especially fine maple tree, then a lean-to, then a hut, then a cabin, and now this little cottage in the morning shadow of the mountain. The widow was a lonely woman and had always been so, even while her mate had lived. She had tried in younger years, but there was something about the sight of the woman that made the people feel cruel, and so she had stopped trying. There had been a gentle spotted cat once that she had loved, but no more. She did not like to think about it. The children spent their after-school hours daring each other to ring her doorbell and tugging pickets from the peeling white fence her mate had painted in the long ago time. The parents, feeling vaguely that they ought to be embarrassed, would scold the children in an offhand way when they found them playing at swords in the driveways. On Saturdays, the fathers would gather the pickets up as if they were so many windblown twigs and toss them in a bin for the refuse men to take away, or burn them up with the leaves they raked in their yards. When they sat in their reclining chairs in the evening, drinking beer from a can, they sometimes heard the children laughing about tossed eggs or words misspelled on the widow's walk. They would turn up the volume on the television. The parents never looked into the eyes of their young because the parents didn't remember a cat in a tree and the stones that were hurled. And as long as they didn't ever really look, they reasoned, they were sure they would never really remember. So the widow was lonely and tired, welcoming the kind whispered words of the one who finally came to her. She only smiled wearily, sighed once, and did not struggle. And what stood up from the frayed velveteen armchair that night was the widow no longer, in spite of what the madmen thought they knew of this world. The moon grew lean and then fat and then lean again, and the green things grew and then died as they always had. And the children of the madmen taught the younger ones to tug at slats and ring doorbells. And that's the first half. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was so amazing. Your imagery just took me right there. There were so many lines. Bright as birds, fires curling up to the moon from like the bird's view eye. That was so cool. Yeah, I want to hear the second half. You'll maybe have to record it and I can post it on the page because people are going to want to know. I feel like they want the part two.
So if I would record it and like email it to you, you could.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll put it on the page. Yeah.
I will do that. I'll record the second half of it. Also, that is from a collection that I have on Amazon, available on Kindle. And the collection of my short stories is called One Past Midnight, 13 Terrors by Kathy Ferrell.
Well, thank you so much. I might have to
Thank
pick
you
up
for
one of those
having me.
as well.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. I want to come back next month, I hope.
Well, you sure can. Oh, well, thank you. Well, this was, oh, I love stories. I could listen to people's stories all day, every day, for real. I just love them. I thought I would read a couple things just because we didn't have 3 people couldn't make it, so we had kind of a shorter crew. I thought I would share just a couple things about my dad. Since tomorrow is Father's Day, I am very, very blessed and lucky to have an amazing father. So, and I wanted to like write this into a story, but I didn't have time. But I'll just share a couple things. So my dad, he's one of the most generous people you'll ever know in your life. And he met my mother when I think he was 15 and my mom was 17 or 16. And my mom didn't have me till she was 40. So they've been together their whole lives. My parents are in their 70s and they've done everything together. Like they were driving, I think it was up to Alaska. They were planning on going on this trip, this long trip. Well, they ended up buying property in British Columbia. And this is like in the 60s. And they ended up building an entire log cabin by themselves. My dad knows how to build everything. Like and he knows how to design everything. Like he designed the house that we grew up in. He made the wood shed out there. He like, and so my mother and him, they cut down their own trees, they shaved their own logs, we even as children helped dig like the outhouse, the potty house hole outside. Now they've added additions onto the cabins, and we've helped cement steps and a fireplace, and it's just, he's pretty incredible in that way. And one of the other things I want to mention about my dad is he's not a church goer. He's not a religious man. He's a very spiritual man. But a lot of people would say that he's a better Christian than most Christians out there. So they visit Mexico about once every year, and they're very connected to the community down there in this particular town. And they're whenever they're there, they're always trying to help people and help different families. And they were doing like an auction for they were trying to raise money to make so that children could have school supplies and uniforms. At certain places, if you can't afford those things, you can't go to school. So one of the stories I heard, I wasn't actually there for this, but my dad was the highest bidder and he kept outbidding himself to increase the amount. And he even paid for church renovations in that community, and he doesn't even go, so he's, I always say he's my hero. He has supported me. I wouldn't be here. Like every single thing, he's just like, do it. Like, you can do it. I support you. Even like the most craziest things, like when I was in 8th grade, because of the history up in Canada, over the years, I've met very dear people up there, children my age that I grew up with. And so like in 8th grade, we're sitting at the dinner table and I'm like, I want to go to school in Canada. My dad's like, all right, let's do it. And like literally that like semester I was up in Canada going to school. So it's like, he's just such a special man. And so I wanted to share a little bit about him. His name is Charlie as well. So yeah, it's a good name, Charlie Curry. So I thought I would read 2 quick story prose. I don't even know how you would categorize these, but the first one I thought I would read because it's about my mother. So it's not about a father, but some of us don't have fathers, and some of our fathers were not good fathers. And so, we need all of those like motherly, fatherly figures in our lives. And those can come in many different forms. It can be friends, it can be people in the community, it can be people that you're inspired by, artists, writers, any of that. So I just thought I would read this one. This one's called Christmas Lights. It does have some mental illness and self-harm talk in it. The Lake Winds Co-op parking lot is setting up to sell Christmas trees. Holiday classics play while I get my nails painted sparkly red at Anna's Nails across the street. Thanksgiving passed recently, and the snow has already arrived and settled in. Festive lights have begun to appear like newborn stars upon doorways, roofs, and street lamps, a tradition of hope amongst the dark, a mark of what is to come. It's that time of year we remember, we celebrate the birth of our Savior, the awaited son of Joseph, and a mother, Mary, who gave him life. Would you like to drive around the neighborhood to see this year's Christmas lights? My mother asked with enthusiasm, wishing a little joy were contagious. She would do anything to help me smile. I often turned down my mother's ideas or exercises to feel better. I'm not sure if it was teenage stubbornness or apathetic laziness. Regardless, I didn't have any plans that evening, so I agreed out of boredom. My depression was severe that year. The wounds on my arms were still healing. Another hospital band was thrown into my bedroom trash. This was the season of joy to the world. I couldn't remember the last time I felt happy. My mother bundled up in her winter coat and boots and warmed up her van. I managed to squeeze on a fleece jacket over my sweatshirt, then a hat over my unwashed hair. The sun had set, but the sky was still a tender blue. I don't recall the specifics of where we drove or what we saw, except that my mother was right. The strings of colors were prettier than I had noticed. Some even beamed beneath a heavy heap of snow. Beside the woman who gave me life, we shared a glimpse of winter peace. Somehow, this was enough to help me want to stay. Every year, as strands of bulbs find their way back to shining among their homes, to the place they belong, I remember and celebrate the woman who saved me, who would never stop saving me, the woman who loved me every step of the way, my mother. Okay, and here's kind of a strange one, but I love this one. And this is a true story. All right, this one is called Suspended Bodies. It was late at night at the 24-hour Perkins on Highway 7 and Hopkins Crossroad, sometime between 2007 and 2010. It was likely around 4 a.m., the time I'd wake up naturally or the time I'd get out of bed if I hadn't slept all night. Panera was my preferred hangout place, but they didn't open until 5 a.m. Most of the time when I was at this Perkins, there would rarely be any other customers at the restaurant, except for the occasional drunk teens or midnight lovers. I cherished the quiet space, the fresh brewed coffee, the waiter or waitress that made me feel less alone, but still let me be. My many middle of the night ventures to Perkins could be described as a coping strategy or a way to channel my abundance of energy. I was freshly in my 20s and recovering from a massive breakdown. An odd event combined with a great loss caused a long road of anxiety that transformed into paranoia. The process of healing from this took years, and to be truthful, I'm not sure I was ever fully cured. But that's the problem when you're particularly observant and intuitive. Separating gift from instability has to be examined down to the last detail. In other words, it isn't easy to know which is which. During those days, there are things I can say for certain, but also a few things I can't prove. This time period is always confusing for me. I have to go back and try to retrace steps that either vanished or never existed in the first place. But this story, in fact, did happen. This I know for sure. This I know was genuine and an extension of good. This I know wasn't an episode of non reality or exaggeration of mind, but a reality of the nature and loveliness of God. That night at Perkins, the waitress seated me close to the kitchen and also close to a young couple, the only other people there. I shifted in my booth and retrieved my journal from my bag. I was always writing. I ordered 2 eggs over easy with bacon, wheat toast, and hash browns, my typical order. I found my pen and began to write about the sufferings of my latest love, God or some new man, I'm sure. My focus was loosely on the paper though, but it provided me a place to rest my eyes, to make the couple feel less uncomfortable with my assumed loneliness, or to remain unnoticed. The couple were a young man and woman, I'm guessing in their late 20s or early 30s. Both of them had piercings covering every inch of their bodies, tattoos, black clothing, all to the extreme. Sorry. All to the extreme. I had an immediate profound love for them. These are my kind of people, being themselves with no other way. A kind of bravery that most would never dare to exhibit or risk in relation to what others might think. The more I sat there, the more I could feel God's overwhelming love for these two people, a kind of love God wanted them to know and experience and believe. As I wrote in my journal, I felt God's gentle nudging, which I had grown to know fondly. And it became clear God had put me there to speak to this couple and to encourage them. It wasn't a forced feeling, but a feeling of an important moment to share my story. God had saved my life, but more importantly, God had a plan for me, just as much as God had a plan for them, or anyone for that matter. At this time in my journey with God, I rarely second guessed myself because I had learned that God would always take care of me and that there was really nothing to fear. I had given myself to God in obedience, which required faith and action. It wasn't that God demanded I do something, but instead it was God using this opportunity to teach me to be strong and to bless me and to bless others. I prayed silently and asked God to give me the words, and then I got up and boldly walked over to their table and started conversation with them. My honesty and courage intrigued them as well as my pure intentions, so they listened politely. I shared some of my own story. I had been abused, I was addicted to men, I cut and burned myself. I had experienced a psychotic breakdown, and I had overdosed and nearly died. My story was one of survival and suffering. I had made dangerous decisions, and I had been careless in the need of feeling powerful and worthy. But I also never pretended I was someone that I wasn't. My secrets weren't secrets, and I was free because of that. My sins didn't define me, and God showed me that. I told them my path with God had been one of resentment, denial, and rebellion. I wasn't a perfect person, and I surely didn't have an innocent past. I shared that I believed there truly is something uniquely sacred about Jesus, and I knew that not only personally, but with every breath of my existence. I explained faith isn't blind or ignorant as people may think. Faith is a response of the sacred. Faith wasn't a life of peace, faith was a life of resilience. And a relationship with Jesus wasn't about a destination. A relationship with Jesus was about learning to exist with intention and purpose in the here and now. My life was indeed saved, but not in the way most Christians interpret it. My life on this planet, the one life I can say I am given, came down to two choices. Will I continue to attempt to save myself and make a life with my own conditions despite my unchanging brokenness? Or will I agree to let go and entrust a loving higher power to save me from myself? I will admit one of my gifts is making others feel safe and comfortable, probably because others quickly know I hold no judgment. I care about people in a way most don't. I care about strangers as much as I care about those I know personally. I've always been open about my story and experiences because I want people to know they are not alone. I want people to know mistakes are okay, sins are forgivable, and it's possible to change, to love yourself in your life. And for these reasons, I had successfully opened the doors for honest sharing with this couple. They explained to me that they practice body suspension together. Apparently, it's where you hang from the ceiling by hooks forced through your flesh. It was their passion, and they had just come from a convention. They showed me photos of this type of scene. It was clear this gave them a form of community and a place where they belonged. They were excited I was open to what this meant for them and that I wasn't afraid or making rude remarks. I truly wanted to understand. After a while, the mood between the three of us was relaxed and had an atmosphere of the unconditional love I had hoped would transpire. Eventually, they informed me they each had suffered some of the same trials as me. The man had been abused and had no relationship with his father. The woman knew depression all too well, and they both understood what it meant to feel alone. I knew then knowing God wasn't the problem. The problem was believing they could be loved. Over the course of my life, I've come to believe from the numerous conversations I've had with non-believers that the majority of people who claim to be atheists often have a specific reason they feel that way. This choice of non-belief is usually far beyond one's own intelligence, matters of science, or the proposed crutch of theology. This choice of disbelief is personal. Atheism is as isn't as much of a response to doubt or uncertainty, but rather a reaction to unquestionable rage at God. At the very least, I know this was the case for me. I wasn't always pro God. In fact, I continue to become confused and angry with the church, which results in a wall between my relationship with a loving higher power and my ability to forgive. But the truth I eventually find my way to is that the distance I feel is a wall I created entirely myself. God isn't fighting a war with me. I am fighting a war with myself. Although they both seemed like good intentioned people, I felt a deeper calling to the man. It was nothing of attraction or preference, but more of a connecting of two kindred hearts. A divine meeting, it could also be called. He had a heart for God, a seed that had taken root and had been waiting to show. I don't know if he knew it then, or if he did, like me at certain points in my life, it probably scared him. Once I could tell this conversation had done its job, and in order to be respectful of the couple, I knew it was time for me to leave. As I began to wind things up, God had a final farewell blessing that was made known to me. I asked them, if I buy you two a whole pie of your choice, will you let me sing to you? They agreed in confusion, but agreed regardless. So I stood there in Perkins and sang out Amazing Grace with all my heart and soul. Two cooks came out to witness the random music and clapped at the end. The waitress stood in the kitchen doorway with a smile on her face. I had the couple choose a pie and then I paid my tab. I thanked them, blessed them, and quietly left. Several weeks later, I dreamt about that young man. He was leading a crowd of people and he walked up to me. He was smiling and I almost didn't recognize him because he had all of his body jewelry out and was wearing normal clothing. He was clean and new in his appearance, but more in his spirit. He looked at me and said with the deepest of gratitudes, I've realized Jesus pierced his own flesh, so I wouldn't have to pierce mine. What can one say about a path so familiar? Sometimes the path of removing our inflictions and healing our scars is the path worth taking. I still think about that couple, my connection with the man and the serenade I gave in Perkins that one early morning. I also still don't doubt or regret a thing. Thank you guys so much. That took longer. I thought in my brain, I thought it was only one page. I guess it was 2.5 pages. But anyways, you guys are awesome. Thank you so, so, so much. And I hope to have each one of you again and again. That would be great. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. And I hope you can be with your loved ones tomorrow. So
thanks. I have to ask you a question before we go.
Yeah.
What pie did they pick?
I don't remember. I wish I did. I wish I had that detail. I really do. But I was, I think 21 and I'm 30. I'm going to be 35. So this is like 14 years ago. But yeah, it was a great night. They were kind of like, wow.
That's, singing in Perkins. I can just picture it. Wow.
Oh yeah, I've done it all. I mean, I sang in Walgreens when I was working as a cashier. Oh, it's happened. So, all right. Well,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful to have
you. See the ones I know and to meet new people. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, that was great.
All right.
Thank you. That was a wonderful story. I want to come back. I'm hooked. 2 times and I'm hooked.
We'll have to do stories part 2. Yeah, in a couple months or something.
Oh yeah, and I've got to record that.
Send me the recording because I will put that on the page.
I will absolutely record it tomorrow.
Perfect. All right. Good night.
Night.
Good night.